Hi, this is the fourth of 5 videos about editing our own work. Um, Editing our own work can be very challenging because often what we see on the page is not what's actually there, but what we thought we said, what we intended to say. And it can be difficult as writers to get enough distance from our own work to really see what's there and to judge whether we need to change things. So these activities are designed to help us focus on things that might need to get changed and help us to find the patterns that we have that we can think about in order to polish our writing. So the topic of this video is thinking about our use of the be verb, making sure that we are choosing verbs that are active and specific. Let me share my screen with you. So these text instructions are also available online and they will be linked in the description below this video. So thinking about the be verb, are your verbs active and specific? So choose a paragraph in the body of your essay, so not your introduction and not your conclusion, and take a moment to highlight all of the instances of the be verb. Those are listed for you here. Is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, become. All those words, if you use them in a paragraph, go ahead and highlight them. While you're doing that, I'm going to rearrange my screen here a little bit. Okay. Once you've highlighted all of the be verbs in a single paragraph, we're going to take a closer look at them. And the first thing we're going to look for is whether your use of the be verb is active or passive. So the passive voice most often looks like is, are, or was, were, followed by another verb. So an example of the passive voice is the ball was thrown. What the passive voice does is it makes the object of the action into the subject of the sentence. So the ball is not doing the throwing in this sentence, right? The throwing is happening to the ball. Someone else is doing the throwing. But this sentence, this passive voice sentence, doesn't include the identity of the agent who's doing the throwing. In contrast to that, a sentence about this same idea in the active voice would be the child threw the ball, or the boy threw the ball, or the alien threw the ball. Whoever the agent was behind the throwing, an active voice sentence would put that agent in the subject position. So let's take a look at my essay. So this first instance of my use of the be verb in this paragraph, often in the folktale tradition, only the hero has a personal name, and the other characters are labeled by their relationships to him or her. So here in this second clause of this complex sentence, we have other characters in the subject position, and are labeled is a verb in the passive voice. So the challenge is here, who's doing the labeling? Well, we're talking about characters in a story, so we could just say the author is doing the labeling, but I'm not talking about novels here. I'm talking about folk tales. So folk tales in general don't have a single author, right? There's no particular one person that I can point to. So I can't just say, and the author labels the other characters by their relationship. But I do have some options here. I could say the other characters bear labels, whoops, related to their connection to the hero. I could say the text or the storyteller labels other characters with their relationship to the hero. I don't really love either of those other options. But I'm just going to leave them in that comment box so that I can come back and think about it again later. Ultimately, this one I might leave as an example of the passive voice. I might just keep it. Our goal is not to eliminate the passive voice entirely. Our goal is to minimize its use to those places where it really is the most helpful thing. And in this particular case, I think the use of the passive voice is warranted because there is no known agent of the action. And that's one of the ways that we use the passive voice, when the agent of the action is unknown, or when we want to keep the agent of the action a secret. In this case, no secret, it just isn't known. Looking at my other highlights, these other highlights are examples of the be verb in the active voice. This is also often true, this referring back over here. The characters are increasingly personal and three-dimensional. I went ahead and highlighted in a couple other paragraphs so we could have a few examples. The transition is, the gruesome mutilation is the most challenging. It is not a viable plot element. So the rest of these are all in the active voice. But that brings us to the second thing I want you to think about with your use of the be verb. Sometimes the be verb is really the most logical choice, but when we use it too much, it can make our writing feel vague and unspecific. And so for example, I noticed that in this paragraph, I have several highlighted examples of the be verb all in a row. They're all the same, is. So here's a place where I seem to have fallen into a rut with my writing when I was making this draft. As I look at them, this one, it is not a viable. Thinking back to our video on pronoun use, this one is probably a sentence that I need to consider revising. So this kind of pattern in your paragraph is a place where you should think about maybe seeing if you can revise out any of them. And one way to revise out our use of the be verb is to look for another word in the sentence that's actually naming an action. Oftentimes when we have the be verb as our main verb, we've buried the action of the sentence in an adjective or a noun that comes later. So here I've got is the most challenging and to the modern audience offensive part of this tale. So here are two great actions, challenge and offend. So I'm going to see if I can come up with a way to revise this sentence to eliminate that use of the be verb. So what I'm going to do is I copied the sentence and I just doubled it here. So now we've got the original sentence is down here, and the new sentence I'm working on is up here. I'm gonna just delete this idea of the most. Challenges and I'm going to bring up that idea of offends. Whoops, I spelled it wrong. So two ideas that I got rid of in this revision are the idea of that it's the most challenging and offensive, and that it's sort of the most challenging and offensive part of the tale. And I actually think that's not, that idea is okay to get rid of. I think that this edit has made this a stronger sentence. The gruesome mutilation of the maiden without hands challenges and offends the modern audience. And then the paragraph can continue. They're not particularly fantastic. And I could think about revising these other instances of the be verb in a similar way, looking elsewhere in the sentence for what action am I actually naming? And can I take that action and make it the main verb of the sentence instead of the be verb? So this was our fourth video in this series on editing, thinking about our use of the be verb, and we are looking for two things. We want to make sure that our verbs are active instead of passive as much as possible. And we also want to make sure that our verbs are as specific and vivid as we can make them. So I'm not advocating, getting out the thesaurus and trying to use bigger words, but in places where you notice you have a pile up of be verbs, look around in your sentence for words that you have already used in that same sentence to name an action, and see if you can revise to bring the action into the main verb. If this helped you in the paragraph you were working with, you can continue to look at your use of the be verb throughout your essay. And I'm always happy to talk through sentence level revisions if you drop by my Zoom office hours.